Thank you for pressing start on episode 35 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcasts. Today we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Into the Breach. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Poe, and joining me is my player 2, playing games he wants to review. He's the Indiepedia with physical media. I'm talking about the start pressin', secret game guessing, holding your controller, DiscoCola. What is going on?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was struggling a bit. I was even ready to abandon this timeline. But with your help there, I think I'm going to get by. I imagine that that might be a little bit of the maybe surprise you were alluding to.
I alluded to a surprise prior to our recording.
Yeah.
And, it worked out that I premiered it on this episode because you were talking about how sleepy you were before. You needed a little waking up. I hope that did its job.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a bit tired, but I'm going to get by.
Nice.
But, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. My blitzkrieging flame behemoth. That's a reference to our featured game, Into the Breach, which we will cover in the latter part of this episode. And Into the Breach is a game that I actually revisited for Underplayed. I had tried to play it back in 2019 and didn't play it for a super long time back then. And so now I got to play it a lot more. Looking forward to discussing that one with you. It is a highly lauded strategy game. Starting off this episode, I have a couple topics I want to get to. First off, it's about gratitude. It's about gratitude for people listening to Underplayed.
Yeah.
I think you noticed really recently that we've gotten a lot of new listeners just within a really concentrated amount of time.
Yeah. Crazy amount of new people listening to the show. Don't know where that came from, but just we're so grateful that people are tracking down Underplayed. And oh my gosh, man, even as we're recording this last night, just even more listens than ever for the past 2 weeks. So thank you so much. We hope that you enjoy it. And once you get to this point, hey, thanks for the journey. If you're just starting out at this point too, that's also fine. We mentioned a couple episodes back, there's no real bad place to jump on except for maybe season 3, episode 4, where we kill our only inside joke.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can make new inside jokes with all the new faces listening. We appreciate you jumping on, no matter where you jump on, to Underplayed. And yeah, our average number of listeners per week has just been multiple times what we ever thought it would be and what it's been before. So
yeah, it's crazy.
It's awesome. Thank you so much for listening to Underplayed. And then next, one idea I had this past week, and it's something we can do once per season, I think, maybe on episode 2 of every new season.
Yeah. We
could talk about upcoming indie games that are alluring to us.
Yeah.
Upcoming indie games that we're really looking forward to. And we've done a lot of this here and there throughout all of our recordings. I talked about Steam Next Fest and trying that out back in season 3. I think the Baba Is You episode, I think that was the episode where I talked about a bunch of demos I was playing for upcoming games. I plan on revisiting Steam Next Fest when it returns in June. It's actually,
nice.
The next one is only a few months after the first one I did.
It's not annual.
No, they do it 3 times a year. They do it
nice.
in, I believe, February, June, and October or something. So still a couple opportunities this year. By the time this episode comes out, it will be July.
Mm-hmm.
So I will have already done all that stuff. We record these way in advance. But this is a great time, I think, to just talk about upcoming games in 2023, 2024, unannounced, to be announced release dates. So I think there are a couple givens for you and me.
Yeah.
And they're huge ones like Hades 2
Yeah.
and Hollow Knight Silksong. We've talked about those quite a lot. So
Everybody's talked about those.
everybody's
quite a lot.
talked about those. We don't need to touch on those anymore.
I think at this point, I'm just like, when it comes out, it comes out. It can wait patiently. I'm not in a hurry.
Right. Same. So we are eagerly anticipating those, of course. But the first game I want to mention for upcoming, and I think it is softly announced for later this year, but I could see it being delayed because it's been in development for many years. And it is a game I talked about when I covered the Steam Next Fest in Season 3. And it is Radio the Universe. This was the top game on my list. And this was like the Hyperlight Drifter-like game
baby.
About you descending into ruins, very sci-fi, battling, robots and mech-like enemies. And enemies have certain amounts of hit points, and you get some kind of a currency or resource if you kill them cleanly, if you reduce their number to 0 without going past 0, if that makes sense. So you have different attacks that might do 1 or 2 or 3 damage. And if an enemy has 9 HP, if you give them like 3 attacks that are 3, HP hits each, you'll get them down to exactly 0, and they'll like give you a resource that you wouldn't get otherwise. I don't think I talked to you about that yet.
You didn't. That sounds neat.
It changes how you approach combat rather than just like mashing
just going
buttons.
ham, yeah.
Yes. The dodge rolling feels good. The art is beautiful, just like in Hyperlight Drifter. And it just looks like it might do what Hyperlight Drifter does, but even more like solemnly or mysteriously, if that's even possible. I'm very much looking forward to that one. Is there one you wanted to mention?
Sure. I'm just going to mention 2. I know we're looking at trying to do it back and forth, but I'm going to mention 2 because they're both currently in Kickstarter phase. The first one is Rune Fencer, which is a little bit of a combat platformer with it looks like it has some time-slowing elements too. Pixel art, totally everything about it seems like my jam. Maybe the actual character sprites are a little bit small for my taste, but if I can get some money together and okayed, I'm going to probably back this one.
Nice.
As well as Geno Kids, which is a 3D brawler, and has sort of like a young rock and roll attitude about it. It reminds me a lot of River City Girls.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, it just seems like a lot of fun. Each character of the band has a different like fighting style, and I love its personality. So I'm gonna try and back this one as well. I think.
As I look at Geno Kids on Steam for their coming soon store page, people can assign tags to games that help filter and search and things like that. A popular tag for this game is one I haven't noticed before. It's Spectacle Fighter.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen that tag before, but now I'm curious about that subgenre. And then the other one, Rune Fencer, on their Steam page, if I'm looking at the right game, it's called Rune Fencer Ilia.
That might be right, yeah.
Okay, maybe they changed their name or something.
But I think that's right.
Oh, okay.
I just didn't, because if you look at the little title card, Ilia is underneath there, a little bit smaller.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I didn't know about it.
It's given me Momodora vibes.
Yeah.
So I'm very much looking forward to that. And that might be a spoiler for one of my list items. Actually, I will go to that one right now. One of my anticipated titles is Momodora Moonlit Farewell. And this is because we reviewed Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight in Season 2. And this follow-up to it was announced a while back. We've gotten trailers for it. But I don't know that we have a release date still. Yeah, it says to be announced. But this is the continuation of Bomb Service's series usually about one explorer going through ruins and battling demons and monsters and using a maple leaf to progress. And this one, just judging from the trailers, looks like it's still expanding the art style, like even more fidelity and effects and features to the gameplay going on. And so if this series just keeps getting bigger and better, I am obviously excited because I liked Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight.
Yeah, there's I think from the same creator. There's a physical copy. So the game's already out, but there's a physical copy of, what's it called? Give me a second. Minoria, which I think we did briefly mention in that Momodora episode. And that's up for purchase right now. And that's another one of my tabs that I have open. Just when I can afford it, I'm gonna get this one.
Yes. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that. And it was a complete surprise to me. That hadn't shown up in my research. What is another one you're looking forward to?
Another one I'm looking forward to is called Starbuster. It's a little bit like a Sonic game, but also like a Mega Man game. It's sort of got the speed of a Sonic game, but you're doing a little bit more. It's a little bit more combat focused rather than just getting to the goal focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, again, beautiful pixel art. So I'm looking forward to that one. I don't know when it's going to come out. I follow them on Twitter, and I always love seeing all the different updates and videos.
Cool. I might have to check them out on socials because
Oh yeah, they don't have a Steam page.
Yeah, I'm trying to find their game. So they might be still pretty early in their development if they don't have a Steam page yet, but we'll keep tabs on that one. Another one I'm looking forward to is called Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. And this is one that we should both be excited for because this is the next game from Simogo. This is their follow-up to Sayonara Wild Hearts. And so this game's been in the oven for a good number of years now because Sayonara Wild Hearts...
That was like 2018 or 17, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. So this I know little about, but I think it is kind of going back to the more of a similar feeling to their game Device 6, which I reviewed in Season 3. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, "The stage is set. Imagine an old Baroque manor, perhaps a hotel or a museum somewhere in Central Europe. A woman wanders in search of answers." And immediately that's conjuring some of the ideas from Device 6 in my mind because that game was about a girl lost in a castle, and you're reading this fairly standard novel looking story, but then the novel transforms and the way the novel is presented to you reflects what this character is doing in the story. And the trailer looks mysterious and weird, but it still looks unique. It looks different from their other stuff. So this is just one where we don't have a lot to look at yet, but I am excited just because it's Simogo.
Yeah, you've got these it's mostly in a gray monochrome sort of style, but then you've got these like bright pinks really drawing your attention. Yeah, I'm excited to see what this game does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And they're also working with Annapurna to publish again, and they've already proven that relationship is really effective with their previous games. And then did you have another one you wanted to mention?
I have one last one, Scarlet Deer Inn. As we're recording this, getting a lot of attention in the last week and a half. This is it's a platformer. The platforming itself doesn't seem like it's doing anything too crazy or inventive, but the construction of the game itself is where the real artistry is. All of the character sprite animation models, they're not sprites technically because they're embroidered. Every frame of animation is embroidered in these characters, and the music's done with traditional folk instruments of the Nordic folk scene. I don't remember for sure, but I shared it with a friend of mine that sells custom embroidery and also is a former music student and is very knowledgeable about just music history in general. And she's like, hey, this game was built for me. So she's excited, and that means that there's some real artistry going on here.
Yeah, this just looks stunning, and it is an idea I never would have even thought of. It's not even one that I would have thought, oh, it'd be cool if someone did that. I just never would have imagined.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to try and make a game where the characters are made of wax, each animation is wax, but I never would have thought of embroidery.
Yeah, this game might end up appealing to a very niche audience of people who like embroidery and related activities. And when a game has a visual style with that kind of care and attention and polish, you can pretty much assume that the gameplay is also going to be there. You know, if they care about their game that much, they're going to make a good game. Since that was your last one, I will mention one more. And the one I will pick to mention is Mina the Hollower. This is a higher profile indie title. Mina the Hollower is the follow-up to Shovel Knight from Yacht Club Games.
Oh, right.
And, they've been working on kind of related Shovel Knight experiences. They've worked on like Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon and things like that. But anyway, this is the next sort of big new property from Yacht Club Games. And this looks like more of a throwback top-down Zelda-like experience that from what I've heard from people who have played it at indie game events, they say that it's hard. They say that it's challenging, very combat and exploration focused. And the Steam store synopsis reads, take control of Mina, a renowned hollower, hurtled into a desperate mission to rescue a cursed island, whip foes, burrow through the ground, and explore a pixel-perfect world in Mina the Hollower, a brand new game from the devs who brought you Shovel Knight. And so a lot of this also kind of looks inspired by Castlevania. It's got that darker color palette. It's got the enemies that look kind of like they're drawn from the Castlevania world. So it just seems like the kind of gameplay and the graphical style that I really dig. And I trust Yacht Club Games tremendously. So those are some of the games we're really looking forward to for the rest of 2023 and maybe even into 2024, depending on how long some of them will take.
There might even be some 25 on here, my guy.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't think Hades 2 comes out in 2023, so that's definitely at least 2024. We will see. Let's move on to our secret games.
The secret games, that you're playing. The secret games,
In secret games, we're going to each review an indie game we've been playing in secret. We don't tell each other what we picked to play and review ahead of this recording. So what we reveal to each other as far as what we've been playing is a complete surprise. Why do we make them secret? Even though you, the listener, probably already know what the games are. Honestly, just for our own selfish novelty experience in this moment.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've ever directly addressed that, but that's why we do it. It's more fun that way. I like imagining what DiscoCola might be playing when I'm away from him.
Yeah.
And I'm never right.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to, try and hold myself back from telling Bopo about a secret game that maybe I've played when he picks it. I'll just be like, oh, Bopo, okay, so when you get to this part,
yes,
be sure you do this.
Right.
I don't want to do that.
We want to go in as unsullied and, fresh as possible. So that's kind of a side effect too. So we will start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 35 of Underplayed.
All right. My secret game this episode comes from Tribute Games, and it is called Panzer Paladin.
Oh,
and I have sent you that trailer, and we've talked about this one before.
We have talked about this one. I recognize the name. I don't think I'd be able to identify it with a picture, but I will soon become familiar with what this looks like.
Alrighty.
Okay. So I just realized when you said Panzer Paladin, I was thinking of Panzer Dragoon.
Oh, yeah, that one doesn't qualify as indie.
No, it does not.
So.
But I have seen this. I remember when this came out, I think in 2020. And I remember thinking, wow, this kind of reminds me of Shovel Knight and Mega Man and some other things mixed together.
Yeah. So valid recognition there. Panzer Paladin is an 8-bit style game that features a giant mech. So herein lies the synergy for this episode. Giant mech.
Okay.
Full stop.
Gotcha.
The end.
Yes, because DiscoCola likes to have some synergy with his secret game and whatever our
I don't think I even explained the synergy in the last episode, but I don't even remember it at this point, so who cares? In Panzer Paladin, you play as Flame, and she is a blue-haired android, and her mech armor named Grit. And it's characterized as an early 80s anime. In this world, objects called spirit weapons begin raining down from space, and the world becomes overrun with occult monsters. Your goal becomes to use these spirit weapons against the monsters that created them and fight your way to Ravenous, the Raven Man demon thing.
Bad guy.
Bad guy. So when I first bought this game, I was sort of expecting something like Blaster Master, a game where you travel some dungeons, mostly in your mech, but you also go on foot in some smaller areas here and there. And while you are mostly in your mech, and you do explore smaller zones as Flame, this game actually mostly resembles a Mega Man game more than anything.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So after an introductory level, again, common in later Mega Man titles, you learn the various mechanics of the game, and you fight the recurring boss, the Horseman. After all that, you're taken to a stage selection screen, and this is the first huge similarity to the Mega Man games, and those similarities only increase from here. The bosses, which is what you select on the stage selection screen, very much like a Mega Man game, all the bosses take place in countries all across the Earth, and feature designs that represent popular monsters from across different cultures. So some examples are, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I don't know how any Swedish works, but I'm going to say Boig in Sweden. You can fight Medusa in Greece. You fight Baba Yaga in Russia.
Nice.
And Lilith in the United States. There's more, but they very much encapsulate what that culture puts in their history, in their monster designs, their mythos.
Nice. And every area feels distinct as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, each of those monsters reigns over a platformer level that features several minor monsters, spirit weapons for you to collect, and platforming traps similar to those found in Mega Man games. I'm going to say Mega Man a lot.
That's okay. We've reviewed Metagal before.
Spoiler alert.
We're going to review Mighty Number 9 next time.
More Mega Mans coming up.
It has happened, and it's going to happen again.
Like Mega Man games, when bosses are defeated, they drop unique and powerful weapons for you to use, though I would say in the case of Panzer Paladin, they're not quite as valuable as Mega Man weapons, but I'll get more into that later. Once you beat each of the bosses, there's like 9 or 10, I don't remember off the top of my head, you get to visit the space station. And then this area is very similar to a Dr. Wily castle, right down to having 4 or 5 levels, and in the castle, the little map animation before each level. So you get that little to the dot on the Dr. Wily castle. So it does that. You make your way through the space station, make your way to Dr. Wily, win, roll credits. And that's Panzer Paladin. Apart from the absolutely incredible pixel art in the cutscenes, the thing that really sets this game apart from those Mega Man games are the actual mechanics at play here. So I kind of want to dig into the weeds on some of those mechanics a bit before I move on to likes and dislikes.
Okay.
First and foremost in the mechanics is the spirit weapon system. Like the trailer there mentioned, there are over 100 melee-type weapons in the game. Each one features a unique combination of range, speed, durability, attack type, and a magic spell. You can get these as drops from minor enemies as a reward, from fighting the horsemen, and they're just sometimes hidden throughout the levels, sometimes behind breakable walls. So I'm going to get into each of those subcategories. Range and speed are pretty self-explanatory, as you might imagine. Weapons are different sizes. Longer weapons, like war axes, are longer than kunai and can reach further. Some weapons can be swung faster than others because they're lighter. Generally, I preferred greater range to pretty much every other attribute of a weapon. I just wanted to make sure I could reach enemies that were far away.
Mm-hmm.
That usually was the most important thing to me. Durability is probably the most in-your-face attribute of a weapon. The weapon loses durability as you strike enemies and objects. Once that durability reaches 0, the weapon will be destroyed. Generally, common weapons that drop frequently from enemies tend to have lower durability and will be destroyed much more quickly. Attack type refers to how the weapons attack. Words include like cut, so blades will cut. Impact is another example, and that's like hockey sticks and hammers. Stab is another example. This trait had very little meaning to me. Apart from like certain blocks that can only be destroyed by certain traits, I didn't really notice one attack type being better or even noticeably different than another. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to learn if each boss is maybe perhaps weak to a specific attack type, but I couldn't really risk losing battles just to test that out.
Sure.
So,
yeah, in the trailer, I see that Grit is holding what looks like a giant fork, and it says that its type is cut.
yeah.
And so I don't even expect that to be a cut type
I would
weapon.
expect that to be a stab. I think
Yeah.
that one's actually a custom weapon that a player made. There's a blacksmith mode that I didn't even explore. I didn't really even
Oh.
look at it, to be
That
honest.
makes sense because it says like points at the top. It's like they're attributing points to the weapon.
Yeah.
And so that's the creation screen. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Spell is probably the second most important trait after durability. In Panzer Paladin, at any time, you can break the weapon you are holding. And when you do, it will unleash that weapon's specific spell. This can include a spell that will unleash a screen-wide lightning attack, or maybe boost your defense for a short time, or, most importantly, in my opinion, heal Grit's health. Those are only a few examples. Now, the most effective way to unleash a spell, in my opinion, is to wait until your weapon is almost out of its durability and then break it before it breaks by itself. Because if it breaks just by losing durability, you get no benefit. You just lost
Right.
your weapon.
Yeah, that's the best way to maximize.
Exactly. So if you're about to lose this weapon anyway, you may as well break it and unleash the spell. Sometimes there are pickups that you can find that will increase the durability back, like you gain back durability on the weapon you're currently holding.
Oh, that's nice.
It's nice, but they're not common to find.
Okay.
So you really reserve it for special weapons that you're holding in reserve. Apart from that, there are also checkpoints at various points in each level, and you can sacrifice one of your weapons to activate that checkpoint. Any weapon will do, minor weapons, big weapons. And the cool thing about this, too, is that if you respawn at the checkpoint and you decide that you want or maybe even need that weapon that you just sacrificed at the checkpoint, you can remove it from the checkpoint altar and either replace it with a different one
Whoa.
or just leave it vacant and risk moving forward without an active
Interesting.
checkpoint.
That is a lot like Shovel Knight,
Yeah.
where they have the
You can
checkpoints.
break those
Instead of using the checkpoints as intended, you can break them for more money
Yeah,
to buy
absolutely.
upgrades with.
Yep.
Cool.
So yeah, I think that's pretty neat. You can even mark that on the likes list ahead of time. Other mechanics worth mentioning are that Flame can eject from Grit, and when you play as Flame, you're smaller and faster. You have this like little energy whip, and you can use that whip to attack enemies, and this whip can also grapple on specific hooks. There's a section in almost every level where you are pretty much required to do this to progress. And eventually you should get to a little teleporter pad that will warp the Grit armor to you. So pretty much in every level, there's a section where you have to play as Flame for a short bit. So yeah, I really went into the weeds on spirit weapons there, but I kind of feel like that's Panzer Paladin's bread and butter, so to speak. So I felt like it was a little important to sort of explain
Yeah,
why those matter.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So on this one, I want to start with dislikes, I think. Grit, the armor, has a little like dodge move, and it functions a little bit like a dash, but it's a backwards dash. So in concept, it's meant for a quick dodge, but in practice, a skilled individual could use it to move very quickly. And I couldn't quite get the hang of just facing the wrong direction in order to get that speed. So I'd rather just have a dash, but all the more power to people that can use his backwards dash to speed through levels. The music, I don't dislike the music. The music is perfectly fine. It's good, solid, modern retro tunes. But the way it's programmed into the game doesn't really work. Basically, the game doesn't loop the music in a way that games typically will loop music. It just plays the 2-minute track and then it restarts the track. So it kind of takes you out of it when you can hear that the music fades down just so that it can restart again. I just wish they could have put just a little bit more work into that. But the music is good. It's great modern retro. So check it out, listen to it. But just be prepared to feel a little bit jarred when you play the game.
Sure.
So this is in dislikes. Playing as Flame is actually a better move in certain sections of the game. That's not the dislike. Even when you don't have to, sometimes it's better to play as her. But the game usually creates a demand for her in the form of long stretches of grappling points over open pits. The whip is a powerful weapon, and swinging across 1 or 2 grapple points at a time can be fun, but it's really, really easy to miss when you're going from grapple point to grapple point. And when you have 5 or 6 of these over an open pit, it can be really easy to fall, and that can get really frustrating.
This game like becomes grapple dog for a second.
A little bit.
Interesting.
So the checkpoints are pretty few and far between, so that's a minor dislike. And I think it creates a difficulty that feels like the games it's inspired by, but the distance between checkpoints can be really, really long at times. So just when you fall off a grapple point, that just sucks so much.
Yeah, that seems like it would really kill the momentum.
Exactly. Related to my grapple complaint, dealing with open pits in the game can feel a bit unfair at times. Some levels have several open pits, many of which can be huge, and the knockback from one hit can just ruin you regardless of whether or not you're Grit or Flame. Grit does have a little bit more recovery when he's falling, but his jump height and movement speed, while feeling fair on the ground as a giant mech, feels a little too treacherous when there's nowhere to land. So it's easy to get knocked out of the air pretty much at any point in the game.
So you're saying the punishment for a mistake is pretty large, right?
Yes.
That might be another accidental synergy with our feature game.
Yeah, I suppose it would be. Still less frustrating, I would say. But yeah, the hardest level in the whole game, in my opinion, is the first level of the space station section. And it isn't because of the boss or because of large amounts of enemies, although the boss is quite difficult in that level. But it is because the whole level is platforming over wide open pits, and there's so many enemies that are ready to knock you out of the air. I spent more time on that level than any other level. Another dislike is that I don't really feel like the various spirit weapon mechanics are explained to me properly, and I sort of alluded to that earlier. I still don't understand the importance of attack types. I was taught how to break a weapon, but I didn't exactly understand why I would until I was really like flush with weapons and could experiment. They force you to do it in the tutorial level, but I didn't understand what had happened.
Okay.
Exactly. So once I had a bunch of weapons, I was able to experiment a little bit. There's something in the pause menu called Spirit Burden, which basically the more weapons you have in your storage, the higher your spirit burden is. But what is this? Like, what does it do? Is there a benefit to keeping my spirit burden low? I don't know. I didn't notice a difference at any point in the game. It feels a little bit like the insanity meter in Amnesia. Just the
vague.
The rules of this are nebulous. Like, I don't understand. But that does it for notable dislikes. None of those really detracted too much from my enjoyment of the game, other than the open pits.
Okay.
So now for likes. First and foremost, I liked pretty much everything else.
Oh!
I think this game's really great. The platforming physics is noticeably different between Grit and Flame, and it feels great to play as either in most situations, so neither really feels like a punishment. The slower speed and lower jump height for Grit makes sense compared to Flame's ability to run and swing. Level designs ask you to get comfortable with most of your movement mechanics, and it almost always feels great. Layout of enemies is often satisfying, especially when you can get 3 or more enemies right in a row, and they're just the right distance apart for you to pogo on top of them.
Oh.
It's so satisfying to move like that as Grit. When you're normally so slow, you can just pogo, bop, bop, bop. So fun. The spirit weapons system in general is fun to figure out and really has you thinking about which weapons you might want to store away for boss fights and which ones you need right away so that you can get to the boss room. But it doesn't have you thinking too hard about it. Weapons are plentiful, so you're rarely stuck in a situation where you're desperate for a certain weapon style or certain spell. Rarely. Sometimes you can be desperate for heals, but the boss designs and fights are also well designed, and they vary from each other in a way that is exciting. The first time I go to a new level, I'm excited to see the pattern that the boss uses and how they look in practice. This is basically one of my favorite things about Mega Man's and Hollow Knight, and I love both of those games.
Oh, man.
The pixel art in general is a really great style, especially on all the different bosses. This is one of the most modern retro games I've played on modern hardware. I don't know all of the visual rules and limitations of 8-bit systems, but this one seems to even follow rules for number of colors that can be on a screen at any given time, and I love attention to detail like that. It'll change the same enemy type from level to level. It'll change their colors based on what the color of the level
palette
has to be. So
Nice.
I think that's super neat to pay that close attention. The cutscenes, my dude, they heckin' did it.
Oh.
They used pixel art and emulated the style of early 80s anime in pixel art. The shape and style and size of character eyes is just right. The shapes and lines on the faces and details in the body, perfect. Even the different expressions that the anime characters, portray, perfect. I'm in awe of this. I would just watch the cutscenes again. But anyways, yeah, this game in general is it's just pretty fun. In general, when it comes to retro games, the 8-bit games don't quite click with me as much as 16-bit games. That's sort of where my comfort classic zone is. But Panzer Paladin nails it. The difficulty feels like an old NES game, but still fair. Visually, it resembles an 8-bit title in most ways. It takes inspiration from Blaster Master, Mega Man, and a dash of Zelda 2, and remixes them all together in a tasty little cake, and they put their spirit weapon frosting on top, and it's so delicious. It's one of the best non-Mega Man games I've played in years, and spoiler alert, I'm playing more non-Mega Man games this season. So I generally prefer the faster-paced Mega Mans, basically ones where I have a dash, but this game still feels just right, all the same. Most people that love Mega Mans as much as I do are not necessarily likely to value this as much as I do as a Mega Man-like, but I still highly recommend it to platformer fans all the same, as well as fans of the Pogo Move, and I especially recommend it to classic Mega Man fans. It isn't perfect, but it was great fun, and I'm glad after having it on my shelf for 2.5 years, I finally played it. I give Panzer Paladin an 8.5 out of 10.
Yes! Games are good. This makes me so happy. I was aware of this for years, the same number of years this sat on your shelf, and I just never looked into it a ton, and I'm so glad this is a positive experience for you. I don't know that I have a ton of questions other than, did you have difficulty choosing between weapons at all in this game? Were you ever confronted with an either or option that just made you sit there and debate a little bit?
A little bit, yeah, because on certain levels, I was taking a lot of hits, and I really, really wanted to hold on to weapons that had the heal spells, but some of those also had some of the greatest attack range, and I really needed that as well, because all of my other inventory at that time were short weapons with low durability, just those common worthless drops that are only good for their spell, essentially. So there were a few points where it's like, oh god, I think I can make it to the boss room. I'll just use this weapon and I'll get to the checkpoint and just kill myself right away in the boss room. So that happened a few times.
And that's great dynamic gameplay. That is giving you a choice as the player, and it's making you take risks or making you be safe. And I love those options in these kinds of games. Grit reminds me of, a very specific class of mechs in Into the Breach, the brute type mechs, the kind of like linchpin mechs, the ones that are front and center on your squad, and that synergy is very strong here. Also, I looked at Tribute Games really quickly, and it looks like they worked on TMNT Shredder's Revenge, which came out last year, and they also helped with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Not necessarily as the main developer, but I'm just looking at their Wikipedia page. Last kind of jokey question. Do you have any regrets about picking this secret game for synergy with Into the Breach over synergy for Mighty
Next
Number
episode?
9? For Mighty Number 9.
Yes, but by the time I noticed that it was a Mega Man, it was too late. I couldn't just swap this episode.
You had
last
to commit.
episodes. Yeah.
Had to commit.
So,
cool.
One more thing that I forgot to mention, I alluded to it, is that the spirit weapons that the bosses drop, they're just spirit weapons. They have higher durability and powerful spells, but they can break just the same as regular spirit weapons. So there's that impermanence there. And I ended up trying to, after I noticed that I could lose these weapons, I ended up just holding on to them until the final boss. And I didn't end up even using all of them once I got there.
Gotcha.
So I used about half of them.
Yeah, that idea of the durability, it reminds me of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And we're actually very close, as we sit down to record this, very close to the release of Tears of the Kingdom. And they've got those weapons with the durability, and it forces you to constantly think about how you want to approach combat differently.
Yeah.
And it's kind of upsetting when you find a weapon that you love and then you know it's not going to last forever, but it also keeps the game from becoming stale.
Yeah.
And so, it might be annoying in the moment, but then looking back, it makes me really glad that the game made me evolve and try new things
Right.
that I wouldn't have tried
Right.
otherwise.
I think if you go revisit a level, you can just fight the boss again and get another copy of it. So I could just come to Ravenous with a full inventory of Boeg's, icicle pop, but
Cool.
I didn't.
That's the saving up the E-tanks version
I didn't care to do that.
of strategy in this game. Cool. Okay.
Panzer Paladin, that is available on Nintendo Switch, and I played the collector's edition from Limited Run Games. It has a cute little pewter grit in the collector's edition. That's why I bought it. It is also available on Windows and Linux.
Well, it is time for my secret game from a developer we have seen on Underplayed a couple times before.
Hey!
My secret game comes to us not from Supergiant Games, who you might be thinking of, not from Simogo, who we've seen a couple times. My secret game comes to us from Amanita Design.
That's a DiscoCola move right there.
That is a DiscoCola move. I'm eating your lunch. My secret game is Pilgrims, and I just sent you a trailer you can watch.
Rock on. I honestly don't know much about this. I've listened to the soundtrack, and that's it.
So Pilgrims is a 2019 adventure game developed and published by Amanita Design. I will read the game synopsis from the Steam storefront. Quote, Pilgrims is a playful adventure game created by the team behind Machinarium and Samarost. Roam the land as you please and make new friends, share a laugh with your fellow travelers, and help them complete their little stories your way. How many different solutions can you find? End quote. So Pilgrims has a hand-drawn, colored pencil look with lots of green, brown, and tan colors. It is a game all about collecting items and characters that show up in your UI as cards. And then you drag those cards onto screen to place them into the scenes. And it opens with this cutscene of a card game being played by the four primary characters of this game that you eventually collect as cards. So we have the tramp, the bandit, the granny, and the devil. And they speak to each other with word bubbles containing icons. They speak in gibberish. They speak in that Simlish kind of language that we've talked about before on this show. But really, it's just nonsense. You're really just looking at the iconography and their speech bubbles to understand what they mean.
Classic Amanita.
Right. And it's very brief. And then it transitions. After the card game, we see a tent in the forest. And the tramp character crawls out of the tent and he becomes your first card in your collection. And now you're playing the game. So not even like a few minutes in, and you are controlling Pilgrims. And you can zoom out to see a world map, which is where you select your next destination. You can double click on a location and you will move to that scene. That scene will appear. And then you can drag the tramp into the scene to put him in there. And visiting some of the nearby areas, you come across a ferryman, and the tramp ultimately wants a ride from the ferryman. And that is actually the end goal of the game, is you need to get on the ferryman's boat and leave this place.
Oh, cool.
But the ferryman will not offer a ride without a bird. So the ferryman wants a bird, and you know that because they have a speech bubble and there's just a bird in the speech bubble. So you're vaguely looking for a bird, I guess.
Iron Man 2 Mickey Rourke here. I want my board.
Yeah. Shout out to Iron Man 2. And so then collecting this bird becomes the main focus of the game. So the tramp ventures on to other locations on the map and discovers other people that you recognize from that card game. So you run into the bandit first, and the bandit needs you to do something so that you can bypass him. You eventually run into the granny and the devil. And by doing certain tasks for them, they can become your friends, and then they become cards in your inventory. And so you end up encountering more secondary characters that you can speak to. And this is where a lot of the interaction happens between your 4 main character cards. So you encounter, these are all of the secondary characters that I could remember from this game. There aren't many, but there's the ferryman I just mentioned. There's a pub owner, a priest, a sad man, a witch, a fishman, a bear, a king, a queen, and a dragon. So that's the whole ensemble of this game. You don't collect these people as cards. You're just interacting with them, with the granny bandit, the tramp, and the devil. And so every time you encounter a secondary character, you can play one of your main characters you've collected. You can also put an item into your character's hands. And depending on the combination of item and character, they might have a different interaction with that secondary character. So you can give your character a gold coin, and then they might hand that gold coin to the character they're talking to, and they might get something in exchange. Or there is a gun that shoots acorns, and sometimes you use that to attack the person that you're talking to. All the secondary characters you run into, they usually involve a puzzle you need to solve. So like the sad man will sell you a fishing pole and a sword, but in order for him to even want to sell you something, you have to cheer him up. And so you have to do certain activities to make his happiness meter go up. And there are many paths for solving all of these mini quests. And they all feed into overarching quest lines that pertain to your main characters of the granny, the bandit, and the devil. After they have enough interactions with some of the secondary characters, their quest lines are sort of wrapped up. And when you find a conclusion for those main characters, you get progress toward collecting the bird that the ferryman needs.
Okay.
So it's kind of nonsensical. Every time you either solve a quest line for the bandit, the devil, or the granny, you're making progress toward collecting that bird. And the game is actually really short. It can be played in about 30 to 45 minutes.
Oh, whoa.
I expected this to actually be several hours longer.
I would have expected like at least 4.
But after that, the game sort of becomes about restarting the story, knowing what's all in the game, and then experimenting with new combinations of characters and items to try to get different paths to solutions. And all of the solutions to all of the tasks can be found in the achievement list.
Nice.
So every time you find a new solution, it's a Steam achievement that you're unlocking. And that is represented in-game with like a bunch of cards. They kind of look like playing cards to resemble the poker game that they were playing at the start. So what I liked about Pilgrims, I found this to be a really relaxing game about exchanging items and experimenting. And it's more of a casual game that's difficult to get stuck in because there are so many of those solutions to stumble across. Some items have tons of versatility. There's a pot that you can fill with water, and you can place it over a campfire, and that allows you to boil the water, and then you can make soups with poppy seeds, mushrooms, or fish. And each of those soups has a different effect on the secondary characters. So you can give the poppy soup to some characters and they'll fall asleep. And that gets you certain places faster than others.
You steal from them while they're sleeping.
That does kind of happen a couple times. You need something a secondary character has. And so how do you either distract them or dispose of them? And it's by sometimes doing things like making soups and giving them hallucinatory or sleepy effects. If you can think it in this game, you can probably do it. There aren't many items and characters overall, but the ways of combining them become exponential. You run into, the fishing pole and a pond, and you need a worm to fish in the pond. And then you get the fish, and then you put the fish in the cooking pot, and that's how you make the fish soup or whatever. But you can also take that worm, and instead of fishing with it, you can just put it on a stick and go directly to the campfire and make like a roasted worm, which is crazy. And I actually didn't even think of that at first, my first couple playthroughs. And then I love the humorous solutions to the obstacles. There's a bear guarding something you need in a cave, and you have to get past the bear. And I'm going to spoil a little bit of, about some of the solutions. So if you want to be completely unsullied with this game, skip ahead like 20 seconds or so. I'll give you a second to skip. So here are all the ways you can get past the bear. You can shoot the bear with the acorn gun. You can give wine to the bear and make him fall asleep.
Cocaine bear.
Yeah, you can give cocaine to the bear. You can make a sleeping potion by boiling the poppy seeds, give it to the bear, he falls asleep. You can hit the bear with the broom, too, that you find. But this adds some really cool variety to the game. Only the granny character can hit the bear with the broom. If you try a different character, they'll just hand the broom to the bear, and the bear will do like a fun balancing trick on his nose. It's only the granny who uses the broom to hit the bear. So I found that those little touches are really humorous, and it also gives the justification for having different characters with different personalities, because the granny is offended by the bear, really doesn't like the bear at first sight, but the others are like chill with the bear or scared by the bear, so they don't want to threaten it. And then there are many fun ways that the specific scenario of the king and the queen and the dragon play out. Basically, the king and the queen want you to secure treasure that the dragon has stolen. And you end up using the bandit a lot in this scenario. And I loved all the combinations of ways that plays out. There are sneakier ways to go about this. There are more violent upfront approaches to go about this. So I love the variety with that specific part of the game. And then you mentioned you've listened to the music from this game, the music by FlowX. You could probably, back me up on this.
Masterful composer.
It is exuberant music. It is music that uses guitar and clarinet and accordion in really carefree ways. Sometimes the music is really jaunty and adds a good amount of energy and style. I would go so far as to say Thomas Dvorak is the Darren Korb of Amanita Design. I don't know if we've said that before.
Yeah,
but
I don't think he's on every single game. Well, I know he's not on every single game.
He should be. He should be. He's so good.
He got too big after those games.
And he started moving
he's
on
too
to other
busy
projects.
now. Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, I love his work here. And I guess this brings me to some dislikes. Each successive playthrough after the initial playthrough loses a lot of intrigue for me, just because I've seen all the items, I've seen all the characters. There's no randomization or differentiation with where secondary characters show up. It's the exact same map that you're dropped into. So a lot of it just depends on your interest in experimenting. And for me, that's not as fresh. It's not as interesting. A lot of the curious charm is lost. So I didn't have a ton of motivation to replay this game.
It's kind of like going through Doki Doki just to make sure you've seen every dialogue line.
Yes. Yeah. Like when you can spend that one weekend doing something with one character versus another, it's like, I got to do this whole thing. Thankfully, this game is short, and I did replay it several times to get all the Steam achievements, which turned into a little bit of unexciting repetition. I like short games, but this game is actually so short that it won't make a super memorable impression on me. I did enjoy the moment I was playing it that first playthrough, though. It's just that the game can feel like it's a starting chapter from a larger experience. There's the moment when you do the devil, the granny, and the bandits overarching quest lines, and you've now gotten the bird, and you bring that bird to the ferryman. And that moment when the tramp gives the ferryman the bird and then gets on the boat and leaves, it feels like you're done with the introductory chapter. It feels like you're done with like the prologue.
Yeah, you could go to another island and have another cast of characters.
And if you didn't know if you didn't know how long this game was, you'd think, oh, this is the transition scene. And then it goes to a wide shot of them on the river, like traveling together. Music kicks in and credits scroll. And it's like, oh, okay. I didn't know it was that short until I got to the credits. And so that was a little surprising for me. And then the opening card game scene where it's setting up the characters, it's a cool scene. They're saying a lot of things back and forth with those speech bubbles and icons. And what that is supposed to mean versus what happens for the entire experience after that, where you're finding the characters, finding the items, collecting the bird. The connection there is inscrutable to me. I don't know why they're doing the card game, and maybe it's just because I'm very bad at deciphering the meaning there, but it feels like it is a dream that the tramp is having or something. It feels like he is having a dream before he wakes up in his tent, and I'm just not sure how that plays into the story, if it should. I was a little confused. But overall, Pilgrims is a fun scavenger hunt the first time around, and it's fun to see how different combinations of characters and items play out. It is an in and out experience with great music, but it might be more forgettable than other games by Amanita Design. So I'm going to rate it a 6.5 out of 10.
Too bad. Wish it was a little bit higher, but any game that has FlowX, let me tell you.
Yep, and 6.5 is still positive score from me. And I think you would enjoy this. I think it's fairly inexpensive on the Steam store.
Most of their games are.
And it's worth the money and worth the time, for sure.
I have one question, one comment. My question is, as you go through and wrap up storylines with the devil and the granny and the bandit, can you no longer use those cards anymore once you've wrapped up their little task?
Yeah, once you wrap up their little task, you can't use them anymore, but the game is still finishable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the number of combinations you can try on successive secondary characters goes down. And so if you want to preserve all 4 main characters to use as long as possible, just don't do the final task in wrapping up each of those main characters' storylines, and then you can try and see what it looks like if you use the devil with the king and the queen, or the granny with the bear. And so those are some of the biggest differences playthrough to playthrough, is wrapping up people's quests and task lines at different moments.
So you can choose to do it in any order that you like.
Yeah, so even though you encounter the bandit first, you can keep him the longest, and you can do the granny and the devil's tasks, get those done, and get their 2/3 of the progress toward collecting the bird before wrapping up the bandit's storyline, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's actually a little bit more exciting to me than I initially thought, because I thought it was you have to finish maybe the bandits before you can even get to the conclusion of the devils.
No,
or
you don't have to do that. Now, if you want all achievements, you're going to have to play with different combinations of solving tasks in different orders and with different strategies. So I had to do I would say 4 or 5 playthroughs. Some of them not even full playthroughs to get all the achievements.
Cool.
But again, the game is so short that I didn't even really feel the time passing. And I did use a Steam achievement guide to just figure out what are the combinations I need to do to get all these. And it was pretty easy.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds great. I like holding on to characters, in situations similar to those. I like to get as many achievements at one singular moment as I possibly can, or at least as close together as I can. That's just like a fun little mini challenge I give to myself sometimes.
Yeah, you can do that in this game. You can get 8 achievements in one playthrough just by knowing what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And then because you get certain achievements, you can't get others.
Cool.
So a lot of those have to do with the dragon. You can only do certain things to the dragon in one playthrough, so you have to go back.
The only other thing I would say is that maybe this will be like Samorost. I don't know much about. All of my love for Amanita games starts through the music, so I rarely know much about the games I haven't played. But Samorost has 3 Samorosts. Maybe Pilgrims will get to that second island eventually.
Maybe that would be fun. And then it's a little more episodic that way. This game is playable on PC, which is where I played it, Mac, and Linux. Those are our secret games, Panzer Paladin and Pilgrims. Let's move on to our review of Into the Breach. It is our featured game. Into the Breach is a 2018 turn-based strategy roguelike game developed and published by Subset Games. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "Control powerful mechs from the future to defeat an alien threat. Each attempt to save the world presents a new randomly generated challenge in this turn-based strategy game." End quote. Into the Breach is from the makers of FTL. Have you looked into FTL ever, DiscoCola?
I think I Googled the trailer when I was looking at the games queue and then forgot everything about it.
Okay. I have played FTL. I played it even way before I first tried Into the Breach, and it came before Into the Breach. Like Into the Breach, FTL is a game of strategy and science fiction. It's basically like a ship simulator where...
Oh, yes. Okay,
yeah, and
now
you can
I'm
assign...
remembering.
It's a lot similar. Like you can assign crew members to do certain things. You'll get attacked by like space pirates, and you get little like power nodes that you assign to different power-ups for your ship, just like the reactor cores in this game. So a lot of ideas are carried over from FTL into the Breach. Into the Breach has a pixel style of graphics with an isometric perspective, and the game is set kind of long into the future after ocean levels rose and nearly wiped out humanity. And you play as humans who are operating these mechs, fighting against aliens called the Vec. And the gameplay takes place on grids of 64 tiles, and you go on these runs, kind of like a roguelike. And each time you do a run, you're selecting a squad of mechs. There's always a squad of 3 mechs. And when the game first starts, you're using a squad called the Rift Walkers. And these are sort of the most basic and easily understandable mechs and the most understandable team. There's the combat mech, who just gets up close and punches people.
Mm-hmm.
There is the cannon mech, who shoots from like medium range, kind of like a tank, just basically your standard tank mech. And then there's the artillery mech, which can launch projectiles over obstacles and usually is the farthest away from the enemies. And through battling the Vec and completing missions, you can unlock tons of achievements for certain tasks. And every time you unlock an achievement in this game, you get a token. And if you collect enough tokens, you can exchange those for new mech squads. And each time you unlock a mech squad, they'll have a different theme. They'll have a different gameplay style and strategy. And all the mechs in the game fit into the categories of prime mechs, which are the bigger mechs that get up close to enemies usually. There's the brute mechs, which are more like the tanks that shoot projectiles. Ranged mechs that usually don't have as many hit points, but they can shoot those attacks from afar. And then science mechs, which do like a weird, interesting, unique ability of some kind, like swapping positions with enemies or shifting enemies to the side. And so the science mechs add a lot of variety. There are 4 islands Into the Breach. Each island has a different kind of terrain and varieties of Vec that spawn. And on each island, you're having several battles with Vec, and you have a certain number of turns to defeat them before you can move on to the next island. And each map has buildings that power a grid that the mechs are running off of. And these will be targeted by the Vec. So you have to defend your power grid. You have to defend these buildings. Otherwise, you will lose the game if you lose enough power. You can always see what the Vec will do at the start of each turn. You can see who they're attacking, what direction they're facing, if they intend to, I don't know, like lob something from afar or do like trap something. And Vec will continue to spawn each turn. in each encounter, which can become stressful if you don't manage them fast enough.
It's fine.
You can also like block them too, which I think is interesting. If they're about to spawn out of a tile, you can land your mech on that tile and they'll be blocked. And each turn you can also, instead of attacking and moving, you can use special abilities. You can repair your mechs if they've been damaged too much. If your mechs lose all their hit points, your run fails. If your power grid runs out, your run fails, and you have to basically start over like a roguelike.
Yeah.
And that definitely happened to me a few times.
I don't believe you.
You can assign pilots to control the mechs, and pilots level up and have passive abilities that can augment the battles. In each battle on an island, you also receive side objectives. Like you might get asked to defend a train from getting hit or defend a very specific building from getting hit. And if you accomplish those, you're rewarded with healing for your power grid, or you might get reputation points, which you can redeem for weapons and pilots. You can find reactor cores. These are the upgrade items that you slot into your mechs to increase their damage or how much they move. And once you finish at least 2 of the islands in a run, you can move on to the Volcanic Hive, which is a tougher final mission that will end your run if you win. And the final mission scales in difficulty depending on the number of islands you've beaten. And then after a run, you can take 1 pilot from your squad and time travel them backwards in time and basically keep them for the next run. Everything else about your run is lost. The overall game has 4 difficulties to choose from: easy, normal, hard, and unfair. You can also toggle on advanced options, like you can turn on advanced enemies or advanced missions. And once you've mastered how a mech squad works, or maybe an entire difficulty level, the game can become about unlocking new mech squads in order to unlock new achievements and continue the cycle of unlocking mech squads and doing their achievements and so on. The game has been ported to more platforms over the years, and in 2022, there was an advanced edition update that included new squads and achievements, new VEC and boss battles, new missions and goals, new pilots and pilot abilities, new weapons and equipment to find, new music, and the aforementioned unfair mode difficulty.
Oh,
They also did a bunch of bug fixes and tweaks. Into the Breach won Best Strategy Game at the 2018 Game Awards. It won Best Strategy Simulation Game at the 2019 DICE Awards and Best Design at the 2019 GDC Awards. So this is a highly lauded strategy game. I did try playing this game in 2019 for a few hours. I dropped off quickly because of the difficulty. I just did not have the patience to sit down and learn all the systems and get comfortable with how the turns work and the mechs, and strategy games aren't usually my typical bag. So I wanted to love it at first, and I didn't back in 2019. But to prepare for this review, I did get to play about 6 hours total.
that's it?
That's it.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And I did roll credits a few times. DiscoCola, just to set the stage, how much did you play of Into the Breach?
At least 15 hours. The way this game tracks time doesn't really work if you keep losing, so I don't know how long I actually played.
Okay. And I'm going just off of what Steam tells me.
I played it on Switch,
You played it
so
on Switch.
I don't
Okay.
have that. So I don't know how long I played it, but it felt like at least 15 hours based on how many nap times I spent on the game.
So you got a lot more time with it than I did, and I'm now interested on your thoughts with Into the Breach, because I'm not sure this is your kind of game. I'm not sure this is either of our kind of game based off of the premise. But how was your time with Into the Breach, DiscoCola?
Man. Okay, this one is probably going to be pretty short for me overall, I'll say.
Okay.
So I'm going to get into my likes and dislikes early here, because
Yeah.
I think that will provide me the most efficient flow in the case of Into the Breach. Things that I like. Giant mechs. They're cool. I like them. The game has loads of different styles and designs, but they are all still part of the same cohesive aesthetic, which is really cool. The variations from each team allow for a lot of creativity in playing with different approaches to the different mech classes in each team. I like that the kaiju are basically all bugs of some kind. I like bugs. I think they're cool. I like their biology.
Cool. Are you like a Starship Troopers kind of person?
I have actually only seen that once, but like, yeah, in general, bug monsters are pretty rad.
Gotcha. Yeah, you love. Hey, this is another bug game.
Oh, hey, yeah, it is. We'll
have a
put
hit-
that on the list.
Put it on the short list of bug games we've featured.
Games like this can get stale from level to level. A game that I mentioned recently, Digimon Survive, uses this same grid tactics style battle system. And honestly, if it weren't Digimon in that game, I think I would have gotten really bored with the Digimon Survive battles. Pokemon Conquest is another one that is Pokemon, but in tactics style battles. That one's a bit more fun, but it's still pretty samey from battle to battle. Into the Breach offers a great number of different objectives, all within the grid battle system. So it keeps it fresh.
Yeah.
And I admire that. Environmental effects can be fun to play with when they're not working against you. Damage by slamming into mountains, fire damage, tidal waves. This allows for fun ways to use what is around you to maximize beyond just direct damage. And I think that's pretty cool. When I first started and failed multiple times, I was sort of beginning to think that the differences in pilots were basically just visual differences, but I did eventually find that you can use different pilots to play in different strategies. You can mix and match even more as you unlock more mech sets, and I think that's a bit genius to have maybe one pilot that synergizes really well with the abilities of one of the mech sets just based on their passive abilities.
Yeah, and you might decide that a certain pilot works better with just a different mech on your team that he's already on and just reassign. I was doing that a few times.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's sort of where my likes end. I know that you're basically expecting all of this ahead of the recording, but at the shallow end of acceptance of the most basic mechanics is where my likes end. So I guess I like a little bit of most of everything, but my dislikes are perhaps some of the most significant dislikes. To start, the game is just too damn hard. Fans of this game listening to this will just say it's a skill issue, get good, scrub, fine, whatever. I suck at the game. Skip ahead 7 to 10 minutes, maybe 14 if I get real fired up. But this game's just way too hard.
It is. I agree. Yep.
Like I said, I don't even know how long I played because of how the game tracks playtime after failure, but it was at least 10, probably 15 to 17. Yeah, it was at least 10 hours before I even cleared the first island for the first time. More than double that to clear the second island. And before I even got that far, maybe around hour 17. So I still, at this point, haven't cleared the second island. I switched to easy. I couldn't handle it. So
Wow.
I switched to easy around hour 17. Then, immediately, when I got to the first mission on the third island, I lost right away.
On easy.
On easy.
Okay.
Everything can tumble down in this game in an instant. Many times when this happens, it doesn't even feel fair. There are a lot of mistakes that I make that feel like my fault, like when I launch a rock and it pushes my own mech into a building. That's on me. That's not paying attention to my actions. When I grapple and pull a Vec to a location where it attacks a different building instead of the one it was already going to attack, that's my fault. But when I pick my starting points for my mechs, and then the second round of Vex spawns box me in from doing literally anything at all, and then end my game in that very turn, that feels like I had no chance and was even kind of done with malice. Connected to the difficulty complaint, but big enough to be its own sub-complaint, I don't get to take enough back with me after failure. You can level up pilots and you can reach their top level, and that happens pretty quickly, but that's it. Like, you get to bring back the skills of one pilot with you, and if I'm not making it past the second island on a play where I'm already starting out in the best possible position where I can with a totally leveled up pilot, and I still can't get past the second island, like, what the hell do I do after that? So I don't get to bring enough back. When we started this podcast, we consistently mentioned that we don't like roguelikes. This is an example of roguelike behavior that I don't like.
So you attribute your dislike for roguelikes to that quality of when they don't do enough to give you that meta progression.
Yes.
Is that really the biggest pain point?
Essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why games like Hades that change that formula quite a bit.
Yeah.
Feel so much better to play.
Yeah. And then, well, also on Hades, like that's a game where thematically and on a narrative level, it is encouraging you to embrace death and failure. You know, this game doesn't feel like it's telling you to embrace death and failure.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's dishing out the death and the failure.
Essentially. But yeah, I can play for hours upon hours upon hours, and no amount of persistence of keeping at it will move the needle at all if I'm already just starting out in the best possible position that I can.
Sure.
And if I have a mech set and maybe that mech set doesn't work out well for me enough to unlock more tokens to unlock another mech set, I'm trapped. I just have to keep playing with the starting mech set and the one that I happened to purchase.
Yeah.
So I can't earn any more to unlock more.
And there are some mech squads that are just not as intuitive to use unless you have like a master's degree in strategy.
So yes, all of my complaints are skill issue, sure. But I feel that this game asks for way too much. The only other kinds of games that I have failed at more than this are like classic shmups. But even then, those are far less frustrating because there's no randomness in those. If you keep playing those games, you will memorize the spawns. In this game, if I pick the wrong starting point for my mechs, it can all be over for me in a second, and there was nothing I could do to foresee that. Failure only teaches me so much, and the rest just feels like luck. When we picked this game in episode 33, you had it in a subcategory of games you don't want to play. You said that you'd played it and jumped it off very quickly. I can see why, and I did the same. And then I talked to another friend that really loves this game, and he said something that inspired me to give it another go and approach it in a different way. And I did play a bit better after that, I'll say.
Good.
But I didn't beat this game. I probably can't beat this game, and I don't think I want to play this game again. Even if I hadn't misdirected my frustrations elsewhere, if I was on my own for a week, this game still puts me in a bad mood every single time I play it. I'm kind of mad thinking about it right now.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I try not to grade too harshly for stuff that is just too hard for me, but I do think that this game is hard enough to be considered inaccessible for a lot of people. And that kind of feels like the point of it, to be honest. It feels like it's trying to be hard for the sake of being hard. I can see the genius at the foundation of the game, and all of the points that I award it are for that foundation. But out of the possibly 20 or more hours I played, I think I only had fun for maybe 45 minutes, if that. The game is absolutely not for me. I'm going with a 3.5 out of 10.
Okay. I applaud your courage to do that. That is by far your lowest score you've given a game. And I actually want to thank you for that bravery in doing that, because I think what you've said makes sense. And these scores that we give to games, they're a reflection of so many things. They're a reflection of our love and enjoyment. They're a reflection of what a game does that we feel is kind of objectively not as good as what other games do. And then they're just a reflection of our play styles, our personalities, our temperaments, our preferences when it comes to games. And so I think this is a combination of so many of those things going on to impact your score. And as I go into my thoughts, I just am sitting here very surprised that revisiting this game, I had a much more positive experience on my replay. And while you were talking, I actually did change my score that I had written down for myself. I went down a little bit because I found myself agreeing with...
I can't imagine what I said would bring it up.
Well, yeah, but I brought it down because I share a lot of your thoughts, and you were reminding me of how much I enjoyed the game in the moment, but then how much I was remembering back to the game afterwards and thinking about how it was hard to get motivation to want to start a run in this game. And so I'll get to all the positives and negatives on that now. But basically, Into the Breach feels like this strategy game at first glance. And then it becomes a roguelike in practice, which I didn't expect. But then where I really grooved with this game was where I thought of it as a puzzle game. So I think it is a strategy game at first glance, a roguelike in practice, and a puzzle game at heart. And it largely clicked into place for me on this go around because I chose to have a much more casual and fun time as best as I could control. I only played on easy.
Okay.
So I did not
Smart
even,
move.
back in 2019, for those several hours, I played it on at least normal or hard. And I remember that frustrating me. So going into this, I thought I will start on easy. And if I conquer easy and I'm feeling really good, I will move on to normal and then I'll move on to hard. And ultimately I ran out of time to try those things. But I still feel like I saw enough of the game to talk about it confidently. I think this game appeals to multiple sensibilities. Like the strategy pitch of the game, daunting to me. The roguelike elements to me, daunting. The turn-based puzzles, appealing. That's what I choose to take away from this. And this game was most interesting for me when I was spending multiple minutes thinking of all the possibilities of using my mechs, especially when it came to positioning them and pushing enemies.
Mm-hmm.
That lets you do so many things. And you can do that with almost any squad you choose, like especially when it comes to how enemies are pushed and just changing where they are to change their intent or like what their new target is. So there were battles where I would spend 5, maybe closer to 10 minutes just thinking through all the combinations in my mind about what all my mechs should do. And I also kind of hit a new appreciation for the game when I unlocked a certain team of mechs, and that was the Flame Behemoths. The Flame Behemoths for me were really appealing because they had a badass name, but then they ended up being a badass team. The possibilities with this mech squad are just so unlike what you start with the Riftwalkers. It just gave me different opportunities to, light Vec on fire and to try to light tons of tiles on fire so that even if a Vec spawns, they spawn into flame and then they immediately are taking damage each turn. It felt like the transition that I took in Slay the Spire from playing the Ironclad to then playing with the Silent,
Mm-hmm.
where the Silent is about kind of planning a move or two ahead sometimes. And that's what I was doing more of with the Flame Behemoths. I just really like using that team. And I think this game might have a mech squad that everybody will gel with
Mm-hmm.
if they have the opportunity to try them all out. But that's hard to do because you need to get all the achievements to unlock them all. So I would almost recommend people research the mech squads and just see what gameplay wise, what sounds fun to you, and then save up your tokens to unlock those squads. I think the system for unlocking mechs through earning achievements is a really fun, inspired idea. Even though it's hard to earn a lot of these achievements, it gives the game a nice steady drip of progression and variety. It's something I don't see in a lot of other games. It makes the achievements feel like a primary activity rather than secondary. They feel justified in existing in this game. Into the Breach is pretty approachable for people new to strategy games because most values are represented in really clear numbers between 1 and 5. The math of this game is easy to understand. If something has 5 hit points and it's about to get hit for 2, you immediately know what the consequence is.
Mm-hmm.
Versus other games where the numbers are double digits
Or percentages. Yeah.
or just vague bars. So I like that the information and the rule set of the game is just these big chunky numbers. That makes getting into the game a little bit easier for me. There is an attack order menu that tells you how things will play out during a turn, what events will transpire first. That was so clear and helpful for determining what strategy I could use. I was looking at that almost every turn. I love the attention to detail with some of the tiles and how they can change throughout combats. There was an instance where I was using a squad called Cataclysm, and Cataclysm can create opportunities for just making chasms, turning tiles that are just normal terrain and then just making them disappear, and they're destroyed. And there was an instance where I made a chasm adjacent to a body of water, and instead of that body of water just appearing the same as it was before, there was then water cascading down into that chasm looking like a waterfall.
Oh, cool.
I just love little touches like that. And I just wonder how many more of them there are that I haven't seen yet. I think the pixel art is expressive and cool for what it is, especially on like animations where the Vec are coming out of the ground, or like when your mechs are flying into the play area and just landing with that thud.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all really stylized. And then the music is very sci-fi and military sounding. It's like not something that probably plays well on the radio
Right.
that you like to say.
It doesn't.
But it adds drama and tension effectively. And that is basically all my likes for Into the Breach. My dislikes, I agree with you on tons of your dislikes with this. Progress is really hard fought. There's not a lot of meta progression for shorter bursts of accomplishment. There can be a strong sense of accomplishment in this game, but the risk to get that accomplishment can be really scary. And because of this risk, it was hard for me to build up the motivation to want to start a run or to try something new with a run. If I became comfortable with a mech squad, I just wanted to main that squad and only use them. Some runs can turn into 2 or 3 hour excursions, especially if you want to visit all 4 islands before finishing the game and attempting the final mission. And so that feels like a huge investment with minimal returns sometimes. You mentioned the not being able to carry much of your progress after each run. That is unfortunate. You know, I want to be able to carry more than one of my pilots with their experience level. And even that isn't that beneficial, because you can easily level up pilots again and get their added benefits pretty soon into another run.
Yeah,
so
my starting pilot, that guy that you start with, died probably like 6 or 7 times, and I've leveled him up every time since. So it's not hard to do.
Yeah. So even that doesn't feel like a very nice reward. It feels marginal in that way. And then the punishment for misunderstanding or making a mistake is steep. It can ruin a run quickly. Even if you think you're doing well, if you let one enemy get through with an attack that hits like 3 or 4 power grid buildings, that can end a run like that. And that happened to me because there was a run where I just didn't take an extra second to fully understand what an enemy was going to do. I thought they were just attacking one building. They were attacking 4 buildings. And I lost that run because I prioritized other enemies with my mechs. And then the reward for doing well feels marginal. If you're maxed out on your power grid and you find what would normally heal your power grid, it adds like an extra 2% chance of blocking damage. It just doesn't feel like that much. It doesn't feel like you can conquer the game and become overpowered like in other roguelikes like Slay the Spire. You know, you can't do the equivalent in this game of creating a deck that allows you to endlessly take a turn until the enemy dies.
Exactly.
Without them taking a turn. There's nothing like that I ran into, at least how I played. So the ceiling for succeeding doesn't feel as high as how low the floor for failing feels. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to put into words.
Yeah, it's basically much easier to fail than it is to feel overpowered in this game. And then the game is very light on story. Into the Breach doesn't have a lot of framework for what's going on here. I also don't know that I care a ton about this, but it's just something that had the opportunity to make an impression, and it just really doesn't. Overall, Into the Breach was a more positive experience for me this time than in 2019, because I went at a more casual pace. It appeals strongest to my puzzle sensibilities, and I love taking those moments to consider all my options in one turn. It can be punishing, but I do have appreciation for the game that I didn't have a couple years ago, and that remains intact. So I was going to originally score this an 8 out of 10. I'm going down to a 7.5.
All right. That's still even a little bit higher than I thought. I had a 7.0 down, but
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I think how accomplishment is defined in this game kind of falls partly on the player. You could argue that it's sort of up to you as far as what you consider your goal in the game. Do you want to beat the game on the hardest difficulty? Do you want to get all the achievements with a certain mech squad? Do you want to try to unlock all the mechs? How do you measure your accomplishments when you're playing this game?
Man, for me, starting out, it was, let's just beat this game for Underplayed. And then it was, let's just beat this game. And then it was, can I just get to the last island, maybe, please?
Yeah,
so
and-
it's just literally progression.
Yeah. Were you trying to get to the detritus industrial
Yeah.
islands
Yeah.
place? Yeah.
I didn't even know about the hive thing that you just talked about.
Yeah, because you didn't
I beat the second island one time and then immediately lost on the
Yeah.
third island.
And I'm a little fuzzy on how that last island is unlocked, because I know that once you beat the game once, you can then finish the game by just doing any 2 islands, and you can do them in any order, and then you can go to that island. But you might have to beat 3 islands on your first time
Got it.
before you can do that final mission.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I never had a chance. So yeah, progression is my accomplishment here. Just
Any kind of-
literally
any
getting
kind
to
of
the
progression.
game. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say first, I care most about understanding how the mech squad works. And that usually takes a few runs of just trial and error, where I'm still learning what all the different effects do, because they vary from squad to squad. And so if I unlocked Cataclysm or I unlocked Flame Behemoths, I would do a couple of missions on an island, just experimenting, not really caring about that run. And then I'd abandon it once I feel like I could start a run seriously, because I don't want to get started off on the wrong foot, knowing that a run might be over an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather just abandon that timeline, start over now that I understand these powers. And then I actually enjoyed going out of my way to get the mech squad specific achievements if possible. And I'd say that that was really fun with the Flame Behemoths, because they changed how I played the game in interesting ways. I was trying to take enemies on head on. I was trying to dispatch the Vec as fast as possible, but the Flame Behemoth achievements made me play a little slower and a little less aggressively. I had to have 5 enemies on fire simultaneously, for
Ooh,
instance.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't like having more than 4 or 5. It can get really overwhelming when you have that many enemies. So I had to space it out so that they were on fire. They were taking damage every turn because of that fire, but I had to make sure that they wouldn't die too soon, because I had to have the simultaneous 5. There was another one with the science mech on that team. The science mech can swap positions with a Vec that's adjacent. If you upgrade that mech enough, they can swap places with a Vec that's 4 tiles away. And so the achievement was just upgrading that mech to unlock that farthest distance,
Mhm.
and then just doing it once. So that was pretty attainable. And then there was another one that was, I had to end a battle with at least 12 tiles on the board on fire.
Oof,
And that was so...
that's a lot.
It's a lot. But you unlock more abilities that make your flame mechs able to light more tiles on fire at once. And so I was just trying to maximize how many tiles can I light on fire each turn while also managing the Vec. And so the way that board ended up looking was just so crazy because of all the tiles on fire.
How many people are you actually saving at that point? What good are you doing?
I know. They have nothing left to work on. Yeah. So yeah, it was just a mess. So then I just kind of want to go into our favorite mech squads and how they work. So who would you pick as your favorite squad if you have a favorite?
Well, I only had the 2. I only had the Riftwalkers, and I only had enough coins to unlock Blitzkrieg. And
Okay.
I only picked Blitzkrieg because the silhouette of the mechs were really cool.
Okay.
And so I picked that one. So the way that one works is your main mech can get up close and it attacks with lightning, essentially. And you can upgrade it so that it can chain lightning to adjacent enemies and buildings, essentially. So you can upgrade it so that it chains through buildings.
Nice.
And then as long as a Vec is standing next to either a building or another Vec, you can chain through all of that. And you can
Oh.
attack like 6 objects at once. And you can make buildings immune. So that's how that mech works. The science one, maybe, I guess, has a grappling hook, essentially, and can grab a Vec or another mech and pull it toward itself. Or if it grapples onto a mountain, it can pull itself to the mountain.
Oh,
so if the
gotcha.
object is immovable, you get
Gotcha.
yourself pulled toward that.
Okay. And does that one float?
No.
Oh, it doesn't float. Okay.
No.
Gotcha. Yeah, that must be a science one. That
yeah.
sounds like a science one.
And then the one that launches, the artillery one, launches rocks. It just launches rocks, and then when the rock lands, it pushes, all the adjacent objects, and it's a good way to block a Vec, essentially, from
Okay.
spawning.
Cool.
So yeah, that one can be fun, but what I found to be the best way to optimize dispatching Vec also requires you to use your grapple tank, and then also once you use that grapple tank, essentially it is a link in the lightning chain, and so it's taking damage. Yeah. So it's really risky, and you can do your best to set up so that it's only Vec getting hit, but you only get one rock launch, which means you only get one push.
Gotcha.
So you very often have to decide whether or not it's worth it to damage your grappling mech.
Did you find most of the time you were using the mechs in the same order? Like, were you always doing the grapple second or last?
At first, but after I got that advice from my friend to change the way I play, I did start doing stuff in a different order, and just like focused on pushing if necessary, making sure that buildings were safe, and then just trying to line up as many Vec as possible so that I can lightning chain them, or at least block more Vec from spawning. That became a primary objective in a lot of my missions, was blocking Vec.
Yeah, blocking. That's one way you can really get an upper hand in battles, is just blocking 1 or 2 Vec from spawning in a turn can drastically change things. The thing that you miss out on is like experience for your pilots. They don't get experience, but it's not a huge deal. Yeah,
don't care.
Negligible. The Flame Behemoths have a prime mech called the Flame Mech, and this is a mech that lights Vec on fire and pushes them away. And they come with a passive ability that affects the entire squad so that they're immune to fire.
Good.
And you can take that passive ability and pass it to another mech if you want. So like if you want to have that passive ability for the team, you can give it to the science mech on the team if you want, so that the prime mech can have another slot for something.
Yeah.
If the prime mech uses their main attack on a Vec that's already on fire, they will do 2 damage.
Nice.
But if the Vec isn't on fire, it just pushes them and lights them on fire, and then next turn they'll get damage. The ranged mech, called the Meteor Mech, fires a ranged attack over obstacles, and it does the thing where it pushes adjacent enemies away, and its attack lights an enemy on fire. So if I ever had the Flame Mech and the Meteor Mech available to both attack an enemy, I found that it was best to hit them with the Meteor Mech so that the Vec is on fire, so that when the Flame Mech does his attack, it does that damage because the Vec's already on fire. So that's one instance where the order really did matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the science mech on this team is called the Swap Mech. And what's so fascinating about this is this mech does not have anything that's like fire related. It doesn't really have to do with, lighting enemies on fire, unless you use the swap mech to put an enemy onto a tile that's on fire. I could see that. But just thematically, it is unique. And this is the one that floats. It's not affected by chasms or anything. It's not affected by water, and it can swap places with enemies. And I was bringing my science mech to water, and I was having it swap places with a ground Vec to just drown it immediately. And that was so satisfying. So Flame Behemoths is my recommendation for a fun squad to try out.
So wait, that one can still swap even when it's in the water?
Yeah, because it floats.
Ugh, that's overpowered. My little grapple guy can't do that.
Honestly, I think Flame Behemoths are a little OP, especially when you upgrade this swap mech to swap with a Vec that's up to 4 spaces away. Yeah, it's nuts. And that works for other things too. Like you can, if you're over acid, you can swap with the Vec, and now the Vec has acid. You have mentioned a couple times getting the advice from your friend. Did you want to expound on how the advice maybe made you play the game differently and look at Into the Breach in a new way?
Yeah, so what he said to me, this is my friend Jacob, who we mentioned in the Slay the Spire episode. I was talking to him about it. I was like, I think he likes this game. And I asked him about it. He was like, yeah, I love this game. And I was like, man, I'm having a bad time. I hate it. I didn't say that I hate it, but he'll know soon enough.
Sure.
He was like, yeah, don't play it like a strategy tactics game. Play it like chess. You have to make sacrifices or you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And, I had just been playing to like preserve buildings and also don't take damage. But sometimes I just have to kill my mechs. And that allowed me to get over taking damage and start blocking Vec from spawning. And that helped a lot. Still wasn't enough to help me beat the game,
Sure.
but it did help me approach it in a different way where damage became not only valuable to take, but even necessary, I would say.
Yeah. And I found that I was doing that with my flame mech, my prime mech on my team, the one that had more hit points. When I upgraded its HP to like 5 or 7, I could take several hits in a match and not even have to worry about healing.
Mhm.
But if I had a mech that only had 2 or 3 maximum hit points, they'd get hit. And then I would use my wrench to repair one
Exactly.
hit point,
Yep.
And yeah, I don't think I ever played a match where a building wasn't lost or one of my mechs wasn't hit. Like one of those two things happened at the very least. And so I tried to prioritize just using my mechs to block hits on buildings because it seems like that's the quickest way you can go down.
Until you get to the Vec that can shoot over obstacles, then
Yeah, for sure. Or like multiple Vec targeting one building and you
Right.
can only get to one at a
and
time.
you're webbed. Never mind.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into it.
I do like that, like if a mech gets destroyed and the pilot dies, the mech is still usable in the next battle.
Yeah.
It wasn't that hardcore where like, oh, now I have 2 mechs available to use for the rest of this run. That sucks. That would not last very long. And I'm glad we did try something new. It's good to, step outside our normal boundaries, step outside of our comfort zones and try a really hard strategy game like Into the Breach. That is our review of Into the Breach. You can play it on PC, Mac, Linux, Nintendo Switch, iOS, and Android. DiscoCola rated it a 3.5. I rated it a 7.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast services like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. Underplayed is on Twitter at underplayedpod. You can find me on Twitter at Bopo, that's BO_PO, and you can check out Bopo on the GG app where you can see my game lists, like a list of all future featured games for Underplayed, all the games that DiscoCola and I have vetted as good featured game titles.
I've got a couple more waiting for your approval in there recently. You can find me at DiscoCola, where don't at me for hating this game. But I am on Twitter as DiscoCola. You can also find me on Twitch and eventually putting something on the GG app.
Next time, we will have 2 more secret games to review, and our featured game will be Mighty Number 9. an action platformer developed by Concept and Inti Creates.
And for better or worse, our 100th game.
Yes, it will be our 100th overall game covered on the podcast, which is, it will be a momentous occasion for sure. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.